Hi, everyone. Welcome to the one more session of the Portuguese semester celebrated in ISPRA. I hope you can all see me and hear me well. We are here today celebrating the women and girls in science. I hope you like this nice surprise prepared by the little girls in science, even if not all love so much science, they love it in their own way. And I start with the question, does it still make sense to celebrate this day? Actually, it was a question that we were asked sometimes when preparing this event. And although it's a very recent, only in 2015, we start celebrating this day. Does it still make sense? Actually, this last year, half of the Nobel Prizes in science were for women, but in general, only 3% of the Nobel Prizes in science have been attributed to women. And I wonder if only 3% of the women had made such relevant discoveries. So actually, Portugal, it's not doing so bad. We have a lot of women in science, more than the average in Europe. And we also have a lot of women in science in leadership places. But I will stop here because the most relevant information will be given by our guests, who I already thank so much for being here today. We have a very interesting and top scientists that are going to talk about. But first, we would like to know a bit more about you, the people that are listening and watching us, and we will start with the Slido. Sandra, could you put the Slido to
Sophia, you'll need to give me a moment because I was preparing for something else. So if you can move on to the next.
Okay, so we can start presenting our speakers. So the first speaker we have, it's Professor Helena Pereira. Thank you so much for being here with us today. Professor Helena Pereira is the president of the Foundation for Science and Technology and a professor at the University of Lisbon. She's also a member of the GRC Board of Governors, and from 2008 to 2010 has presided the AMONET, the Portuguese Association of Women Scientists. Her research focuses on forests, natural resources, and biorefineries, and has rewarded her with numerous scientific, academic, and entrepreneurs prizes. We are very proud to have you here, and we would like to hear about what you're going to tell about women in science and your path.
Yes, good morning. Thank you, Sophia, for your introduction, and thank you for having invited me to speak on this meeting. It is, in fact, a passion of mine to speak about research and to speak about women and girls in research. So thanks a lot. I will speak a little bit on the performing and the funding of science in Portugal related to gender. So the question is gender relevant when we are speaking about performing research or funding research? I will share my screen. I have a small presentation. So my question, as I told you, is if gender is relevant in Portugal regarding the funding and the performing of science. In fact, and as you already told us, in Portugal, we are rather well in what relates the proportion of women researchers working in our country. We are well above the European average, and about half, in fact, we have almost equality when compared to others. So this is, of course, good news, but the question still remains, is gender still an issue in Portugal when we are speaking of research? Well, and we will see during my presentation that my conclusion is that yes, it still matters. First of all, let me show you some data on the number of researchers in Portugal along the last 5 or 10 years, almost 10 years. So these are official statistical data, and that's why we stop at 2018. But we can see already the trend. So we have a fantastic increase in the number of researchers overall in Portugal. So from 28,000 in 2013 to 37,000 in 2018. And they still increased during the last 2 years. But then let's look at the gender proportion of researchers. And here we see that women are almost not exactly half, but almost half of the researchers. And this proportion also increased. Still, the increase in proportion of women is slower than the increase in the total number of researchers. When we are looking at the data from my foundation's data, from FCT data, and we are looking at our research units and the members integrated, the researchers that are integrated in the research units, we see a very nice panorama of the number of the proportion of researchers that are women. We have a total of 309 research units, and 53% of the researchers are women. So this is a well-balanced research world in Portugal. But, and here comes the but, when we look at the coordinators of these research units, we see that the proportion decreases very much. So 32% of the coordinators of the research units are women. Looking also at another indicator relates to the contracts for researchers that FCT is funding. We fund different levels of research contracts, starting from the lowest level, which is the junior researcher, going up to assistant researcher, principal researcher, coordinator researcher. So the coordinator researcher is equivalent to a full professor in the academic world. And here we see really a clear scissors effect when we consider the percentage of women in each level. So we have 56% in the lowest degree. So women are a little more above the half, but then it decreases steadily. And at the top level, we have only 20% of women. Of course, the system is increasing mainly by the doctorates, by the students that are doing their doctorates, and that in a couple of years will, of course, go professionally to other professions, but also increase the research world. And if we consider the PhD scholarships that we gave away every year, this is the main basic funding of PhD scholarships in Portugal, we see that we have a majority of women in PhD scholarships. So this will mean that in the near future, so in a couple of years, we will have even more women entering their professional world with a PhD. Now, considering projects, so the funding of projects is also an important activity of a funding agency, and of course FCT also allocates quite a bit of money of budget to funding projects, and we'll consider the projects. Of course, women are well involved in all projects, but what interests us is the women as PI of the project, as the coordinators of the projects. And there we can see that the women are in minority. So 45% in all projects are women. And even worse, if we consider international projects, and this relates mainly to European projects, then the percentage of women as PI of projects clearly decreases. Well, this is related, of course, to funding, but also to the performing of research from our community. Now let's look at another aspect of the funding, of our funding process. It is the evaluation of the different instruments. And of course, FCT, as all the other funding agencies, what we do is that we open calls, competitive calls, and then we evaluate the applications that we receive. And the evaluations are done by independent external panels of evaluators. In Portugal, we use mainly international evaluation panels, except for one case. And this case is what is marked here with a red line, is the PhD scholarships. Only for that case, we use national evaluators. Well, and in this funding for this instrument, in these PhD scholarships calls, we have equality in the number of women and men evaluators, both as panel evaluators, as well as another important factor, as panel chairs. So here we have 50%, we have here, and we have had that for the last two years. But the panorama is not so good when we consider all the other instruments where we have these international panels. And there we have a much lesser proportion of women evaluators, both as evaluators and even worse, as panel chairs. We, of course, we know that in other countries, the research landscape is a bit different from Portugal. So we have, in general, more men researchers in these countries, from where we recruit the evaluators. However, our strategy in FCT is to achieve also gender equality also in these international evaluation panels. So what I say is that the world is very big. There are many women doing excellent research all over the world. And one thing that this pandemic was good is that we don't need to have physical presence of the evaluators, so that simplifies the recruitment of international evaluators. So we are very attentive to pursuing this gender equality also in the international panels. So I am finishing. This is my last slide. These were a few indicators that show, in fact, what are my main conclusions and remarks in this small talk. So in general, of course, I think that the overall research environment needs more women all over the world. This means that we have to increase the awareness in the young generation. And of course, this links to the education. We have to enhance the PhD programs, and this links to universities. But also important, we have to increase the attractiveness and the stability of research careers. This is one of the main topics of the Portuguese presidency here in this semester, in the context of the science area and the area of Europe. And of course, a societal recognition of knowledge and science is important And in fact, this last year showed us how important science is to cope with crises. Also, is that we need more women in senior and influential positions. So we have to be aware also of the gender unbalances in the different areas, and we should increase and empower women in decision-making structures. So some points where we can have some active actions towards gender balance is, for instance, in the higher education institutions, where we can have an active action in terms of the academic committees and juries. And of course, in the funding agencies, to have what I have told you about the equality in the evaluation panels for our calls. I hope that we can do some of these actions, because if we rely only on time, then the evolution is too slow, as we have already quite proved in the past times. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Professor Elena. This was very, very interesting presentation. Very good to have numbers, as we all as researchers, we always like to have numbers, and I think there are very good recommendations. We will have, there are some questions already coming, but I think we will save the questions for the panel discussion we will have later. There is already some questions coming in, and I think now should be the time to do the Slido we have proposed to know a bit more about our audience. Are you ready, Sandra?
Yes, now I am, and good morning, everyone, and apologies for the previous glitch. Technology is not always on our side. So do you see the screen now?
Yes,
please say yes. Okay, so those of you that haven't joined the Slido yet through the browser, you can just point the camera of your smartphone, for example, to the QR code.
Or you can enter in the website of Slido and use the code that you see there.
So if you want to go through your browser, you can either do sly.do or you can do slido.com, and you enter this code, WG_SCI for science. Or if you are on your phone, you just point the camera to the QR code and you should be directed straight to the poll. So I will activate the poll now. And the first question is just to get to know a little bit our audience. Where are you joining us from? And I'll answer that too.
Portugal, there is a strong representativity from Portugal. There is Italy, there is also Italy. I saw it.
It was me.
A place I was not aware.
It was me. I typed too fast. Portugal,
Cambridge, Malta, Switzerland. Yeah.
Maybe we wait until we have 70, 75
share.
participants, and then I move on to the next question, Sophia.
Yes. It's also nice that the people are putting where in Portugal they are coming, but they are also following us from the moon. And it's not the first time that we have people following us from the moon, so it must be the same person. Gail in Belgium, Germany, Naples.
Okay, so next question. On a scale of 1 to 5, how much do you miss the office? Not at all, at least I don't have to shower every day. Nope. It's comfy and I hate to wear shoes. Or if at least the kids would be out, or I miss my supervisor so much. So I'll answer that too.
Seems a lot of people are missing the office, but not so much the supervisor or the boss.
Probably she's not a woman.
Exactly.
It was a joke. Okay, I move to the next one, Sophia.
Yes, please.
A more serious one. So just to know how many men and women we have in the house. Do we have a problem of gender imbalance here?
I think so. Maybe, you know, it was also our mistake not to have a balanced panel to start with, but you know, the male applications were just not as good, so we had to choose. I think we can finish.
Yes, I think we can finish the poll. Thank you, everybody, for contributing.
Thank you. So now we move to the next part of our event, and we have three top level researchers, all of them winners of the European Research Council grant. To the ones who don't know it, it's really grant for top researchers, which is very, very difficult to get. And we are very proud to have three women here talking about their experiences. And I will start by introducing Raquel Oliveira, who is the head of the Chromosome Dynamics Lab at the Instituto Gulbenkian de Ciência in Portugal. Raquel has made critical contributions to uncover how chromosome morphology influences the fidelity of cell division. She was involved in the creation of PARSUC, the Portuguese Association of Researchers and Students in the United Kingdom. We also will have some collaborations with them for the semester, so stay tuned. And was also the recipient of Prémio Dona Antónia Adelaide Ferreira, attributed earlier to a Portuguese woman of outstanding professional achievements. So Raquel, thank you so much. The floor is yours.
Thank you, Sophia, and thank you, everyone. So I'm trying to share my screen so I can. So thank you. This picture was actually taken out of the beautiful work of a former PhD student in my lab, Eva Piscado, who was a fantastic knitter as a hobby. And we still use a lot this beautiful chromosomes as our pet toy for talks and movies and examples and everything. And again, I want to thank you for the invitation, for being here and joining this celebration. And I still think it is important to celebrate this day. And I think that we still have a long way to go onto gender equality. So what I want to do with you today is to discuss what this dance of chromosomes. And before I get into the dancing business, I just want to start by introducing what I'll be discussing with you, which is really these beautiful chromosomes that we all have in our cells. And this is here the example for the human karyotype, but is in these chromosomes that the genetic information is stored for all the living organisms. And what I thought I'll do for the aficionados on human karyotypes, you may have noticed that this would be a female karyotype because it has two X chromosomes, whereas males would have an X and a Y. And what I want to do with you today is to tell you a little bit about the challenges that these chromosomes have throughout their lives, along with a little bit of the challenges that the human beings that share two X chromosomes may have in a career in science, and some of them are applicable to other parts of society. So I'll just start by introducing myself a little bit. So I'm originally from Portugal, from Porto, and I studied biochemistry at the University of Porto. And during the course, I had my first international experience through the Erasmus program. And I went to Amsterdam to work with Bert de Boer on plant physiology. And after that, I joined the PhD program from the Coimbra University, and I did actually my studies in the University of Porto under the supervision of Claudio Sunkel. And during this time, I had another international experience working with Christian Lehner and Stefan Heinemann at the University of Bayreuth. And after concluding my PhD, I went to the University of Oxford to work with Professor Kim Naismith. And as you may have noticed, there's a slight gender bias in the mentors that I had throughout my career. And this was both good and bad. So the good thing is that I was possibly a bit naive about the challenges that women can have. And of course, the bad thing is that I was not really faced with the potential challenges, and possibly this naiveness was a good thing to continue with my career. But I also lacked a bit on discussing with peers that could have come. I decided to move back to Portugal, and that's where I've been since 2012. And here I should say that there is really an outstanding example of having colleagues to discuss these gender bias issues, because indeed nearly half of our PIs are women, and including the current director that is going to talk with us today later. And I've also had the privilege of work with amazing people. And I think that's, one of the advice that my former supervisor gave me was that the most important thing that you have to do is to recruit the right people, because the people that work with you are really the base of the success that you may or may not have in your career. And here I'm really thankful for, having been able to work with such amazing people. And what we do in the lab is really study this process of symmetry and how every time that a cell divides, and here I'm just simplifying with 3 chromosomes, but we actually have 46 in our cells, how do they ensure that you have this beautiful symmetry and not errors occur leading to aneuploidy, which is the 2 daughter cells will inherit the wrong number of chromosomes, or even breaks in the DNA molecule that could lead to the loss of genome integrity. And if we take the human body as an example, it has been estimated that from the single cell stage throughout its life, our bodies experience about 10,000 trillion of cell divisions throughout its life. And this accounts for all the basic processes that for human development that are common throughout nature, such as reproduction, development, growth. And the big challenge here is really to divide equally so that the genetic material that is segregated between the 2 daughter cells is equally inherited and no mistakes take place. And just to illustrate it, how does this happen? And now you'll see why I call this the chromosome dance. I'll just give you one of the examples that I think is still one of the most beautiful movies of cells dividing, which we'll have here, a cell in a Petri dish. And the nucleus is this area here, and is where the chromosomes actually are, and where all the interesting action takes place from my point of view. And you'll see that the chromosomes start to drastically change their shape and become this X-shaped structures that we normally see in the karyotypes. And they really dance, and this dance is absolutely critical to ensure the fidelity of cell division. So it requires that all the chromosomes align at this so-called metaphase plate. And it seems that the other chromosomes really wait one for the other, so that in a beautiful synchrony, very much like a dance, you see the 2 daughter cells inheriting exactly the same genetic material. And this is beautiful studied in cells in a Petri dish. But in our lab, what we actually prefer is to study this fundamental process of cell division in the fruit fly. And for several reasons, but one of them is that we can actually study the process of cell division, but in the different cells within the context of questions, not only on how the cells divide, but also how does this impact on the entire tissue and organism development. And this is absolutely critical for various aspects of human health. And the most, when errors in cell division take place, this has been shown to be the basis for different human pathologies. I think the most notable one is cancer, and the most given example, where we can see that, for example, in cancer cells, it is very common to have these errors, this aneuploidy, which is errors in the number of chromosomes, as well as defects in the structure of chromosomes that often arise from the fact that you have this loss of genome integrity that can be from breaks that occur in the DNA molecule. And another important issue, and I think for this audience, since we are 80% female listening to us, I think another important issue here is really that errors in this process of division have been linked to infertility, and this is particularly true in case of the female, and also a higher onset of genetic disorders. Here I'm exemplifying Down syndrome, which is another case of aneuploids, 3 copies of chromosome 21 instead of only 2. And I just want to spend a minute on these graphs because, again, for this audience, I think this is very important, and particularly when we are discussing this, career of female in science. I think we often, this is accompanied by a decision of delaying in starting a family. And this is true in science and in other parts of society. And I just want to leave a word of caution to all the people that are going through that route, because indeed it is known that the fertility decreases sharply with maternal age. And this is a problem that is specific for women. And I'm happy to discuss the reasons for the question time, and with age there's also an increase in spontaneous abortions. Is an XX challenge, and particularly when we want to match careers with families, this decision of delaying the starting a family can come at a high cost. And the research that we do in our lab is really very fundamental questions on trying to understand how do chromosomes really shape themselves to undergo this challenge of cell division and to perform this dance in a very accurate manner. And, we have various questions on trying to understand how does the shape of the chromosomes really ensure this process of symmetry, and what are the changes that need to occur so that the 2 daughter cells inherit the same number, but also the same structure, and no errors in the DNA molecules every time that a cell divides. And here we pose the questions at different levels. So a big part stems from the fundamental aspects, how do chromosome errors can impact on development and biology of human disease. And as I mentioned, we use mostly the fruit fly as a model organism, but we also have some human, particularly patient cells, to uncover this broad questions. And this is possibly a more proper division of how the questions are divided. And here I really want to give a word on highlighting the importance of fundamental research, which is what we are mostly busy with, because this is the knowledge that we uncover at this level that actually even allows us to go into higher levels, and particularly with human disease. And just to end, I just want to thank everyone that was really influential to me throughout my career. And of course, all the the funding bodies that made this possible. And the last word, I want to thank the family, because as I often say, for women in science, the best advice that I can only give is find the right partner, because indeed you need to have a supportive partner to ensure that you are allowed to succeed in your career. And I thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you so much, Raquel. We had some problems with the sound, some breaks, but I think the main message really passed, both about your career and about your research. It was very interesting, very beautiful pictures. And I could not agree more with your last statement about to have a really supportive partner. So we now move to our next speaker, who is also coming from Institut Gulbenkian de Ciencia, who had made a major contribution for this event in structuring and also giving a high standard speakers. So I would like to introduce Maria João Amorim, who is head of the Cell Biology and Viral Infection Laboratory at the IGC. She's also a biochemist who turned virologist. Her group studies influenza A virus host pathogen interactions. She has responded to the COVID-19 pandemic with a new research line and conscientious effort to bring science to the general public frequently in TV, radio programs, and newspapers. Maria João is also involved in actions to promote equal opportunities for women in STEM fields. So Maria João, thank you. And please go ahead.
Thank you very much for this invitation. It's a pleasure being here. I will now share my screen. Can you see the presentation? Okay, good.
Yes, we can see.
So today I'm going to talk to you about the theme that is very in fashion these days. So how do viruses change the world? Of course, through the perspective of a woman in science. And this is, I would say, it's almost an easy task at the moment, because overnight we have seen the restructuring of our society. We have seen super crowded cities becoming empty. We have seen a restructuring of the educational system and our kids staying at home. We have seen hospitals becoming super crowded, excess mortality, and this is only a short-term consequence of a pandemics. And we are all very anxious to think what the long-term consequences or the long-term effects will be. And for a good reason, really, because over the centuries, we have been observing different pandemics that are caused by viruses, by bacteria, and here that are organized in terms of death toll. And most of them have provoked some or have affected our ways of life in a way or the other. And not all of these changes are bad. There have been certainly some public health changes that promoted better sanitation, construction of hospitals, better control of viral infections. We observe advances in medicine, education, technology, arts, and economics, and as well in societal advances. And I always like this example of the Black Death in the 14th century, where because of shortage of workers, they could demand for better working conditions. And for the purpose of today, which is celebrating women and girls in science, I would also like to refer to the fact that the 1918 Spanish flu has, together with the First World War, and that is generally what we think about, but has allowed women to actually start occupying jobs that were either exclusive or very male-dominated, as you can see in here. And this in turn has allowed women to start fighting for the right to vote, an equal career progression and equal opportunities and equal pay, which is something that unfortunately has not yet been achieved, and is something that we should definitely prioritize, because we should understand that looking through a problem with a diversified team is always the better solution to tackle a problem. But it's definitely in science that epidemics, viral infections have had the most big advances and the most big contributions. Because we were asked, and because of our curiosity to try to solve some problems, we have identified what viruses are, that there are different viruses. We have identified how they can appear in the human population through these zoonotic events, meaning a virus that is used to replicate inside an animal, to start replicating in humans, and to be perpetuated. So there's several different layers of complexity that started being understood, including, for example, how viruses infect different organisms, how they affect different organs, how they infect different cells, and even identify small factors inside our cells that are absolutely critical for the virus to replicate. And this definitely allows for the development of antivirals and other therapies in general, even using viruses itself, like, for example, bacteriophages to fight bacteria. And this has been the work of many different men and women over the centuries. And it is very clear that the level of recognition and opportunities that both men and women have had during the centuries has been quite different. And it has been quite different, and we can see very clearly through the level and the impressive, really, gender gap in the number of Nobel laureates. And virology is no exception. It's actually quite a male-dominated field. And in the middle row here, I'm showing you some of the men that were awarded Nobel Prizes, but only compared to one woman that was involved in the discovery of HIV. And yet today, if I ask you this exercise to think and to picture a scientist that you would want to be involved in a Hollywood film, very few of us would actually choose a woman, and even fewer of us would choose a woman that is not Caucasian. And so making these leaflets slightly impossible to achieve, although this would be ideal to have important role models in society that would be able to then attract girls to science and to reach the gender parity that we so much want to attain. But I was lucky, I have to say, I was very lucky, because first of all, I was allowed to study. And it's a right that we shouldn't take for granted, because today still many women are still not allowed to study. And only 35% of the countries worldwide have actually reached the educational parity. And I was also allowed to study in different universities, the University of Porto in Lisbon, in the University of Wageningen in Holland, where I did my Erasmus, in the University of Cambridge in the UK. And I had the opportunity to experience different projects, different contexts, before I settled as a group leader at the Instituto Gulbenkian de Ciência. And going back to what Raquel was referring to, and that is very important, this career path has taken me such a long time. And because of that, I delayed having my first and only child until my 40s. And this is food for thought. It's serious food for thought. During this career stage as well, I've also gained interest for other activities, like actively promoting gender parity, educate the next generation of students, which is very important, bringing same opportunities to men and to women. And also, I have been engaging the public in scientific affairs. And now we know how that is important, because we can see, for example, what fake news are doing to be able to control these pandemics, and how information should be delivered in a way that should be clear and accessible to everybody. So this career path has also allowed me to have a different vision for virology, but I haven't done this on my own, right? I've done this with my team and the people that have been in my lab, past and present. And here I'm showing you the people that are staying at my lab, my PhD students, the postdocs that work with me. And we've all came up with a different vision for virology that I will be exploring in this ERC grant that I've been awarded. So you see, we work with influenza A virus, another very important virus, because it provokes yearly epidemics and occasionally it provokes pandemics. And what we have identified is that this virus, once it infects the cell, it can create compartments where it places its own components. And this is very useful because it can allow the virus to control its own reactions. And on top of that, what we have shown is that these compartments have got the properties of liquids. So imagine, for example, if you think about 2 drops of water, you can immediately picture them being rounded, right? And they can fuse and they become round again, and they can also deform. And in cells, we observe the same. And this actually has got a major consequence to how we understand biology, and it's revolutionizing our understanding. And so the consequences are that in cells, you can form compartments very much like you do when you mix oil and vinegar together. When you mix these 2 components, you know that they segregate and they can't mix very well. And in the cells, this happens the same. And the consequences for this are actually quite big, because it allows to create different environments with different concentrations of material, and it allows to carry on particular reactions. And this for viruses is of course very important. And in fact, in the probably the last 2-3 years, there has been a lot of liquid compartments described for a series of viral infections, of which I now talk about influenza A virus, as you've seen, but you've got rotavirus and reoviruses as well, rabies, measles, a very important pathogen, HIV, and even SARS-CoV-2. And we have identified them, and yet we do not know the most fundamental basic questions that are so important to discover. We do not know, for example, how the cell helps in the formation of these liquid compartments. We do not know whether being liquid versus being something else, a solid or a gel, is actually important for viral replication. And we do not know if we can capitalize on these material properties in order to create new antiviral strategies. And this, of course, constitutes a new layer of complexity to address viral infections, which is what I propose to do with this ERC that I have been awarded. And so, two final remarks. One of them, by doing this, I will be able to connect really distant fields of research, for example, neurodegeneration, cancer, and infectious diseases, just because they all share in common the ability of regulating and deregulating liquid compartments. And as a second note, I would like to tell you that it will be incredibly likely that new pandemics will arise, okay? It's something that we have endured during the centuries, and that our way of life really propels. I mean, we live in crowded cities, we travel a lot, we have contact, we have placed animals in the borders of the cities, and we definitely farm a lot of animals to be able to eat them. So there's a huge propensity for new viral infections to appear and emergent viral infections to appear. So we need to prepare, okay? And to prepare, we need to know. And to know, we really need to create a critical scientific environment and a critical scientific culture, and to look into these problems. And these problems are very complex. So we really need to look at them at a multidisciplinary level, and using a team that is truly diverse. And that is why achieving gender parity as well as ethnicity parity is extremely important. And I thank you for your attention and welcome your questions.
Thank you so much, Maria João. It was a very, very nice presentation. And in fact, we could not agree more on the term of the diversity. Here we were not very inclusive, in fact, because we are all female Caucasians. But we'll have another, but we also learn with our mistakes or in the process. And we also have planned for May, so stay tuned. We will have an event that we will discuss diversity in a larger effect. So I will now introduce our next speaker, who is Ana João. Ana João is currently a team leader at ICVS School of Medicine, University of Minho in Portugal. She's also a science outreach coordinator responsible for science dissemination and health literacy promotion for the society. Her research is focused in unrevealing how our brain encodes rewarding and aversive events to drive motivated behaviors. So thank you, Ana João, to accept our invitation. We're looking forward to hear you.
Okay, thank you very much, Sophia, for the kind introduction, and thank you very much for the invitation. It is a pleasure to be here and share my pathway throughout science as a woman. So I will start sharing my screen. So our team has been interested in understanding reward and aversion, and we are trying to understand how our brain encodes this information and translates this into behavior. And we do that in Portugal, in the north of Portugal, in Braga, which is a very rainy city considering Portuguese standards. And first I would like to tell you a little bit how I became a scientist. And what really inspired me to become a scientist was my natural curiosity since I was very, very young. And here it's not me, it is my daughter that is in one activity that we promote for the schools every year. And she's also very curious about the brain, although she doesn't want to be a scientist, as she often tells it to me. So this curiosity was further enhanced by inspiration from women in science that really made me want to be a scientist later in life. And I always like to give the example of Rita. She was a scientist, a neuroscientist, and she was a Jew in the Second World War. And she also came from a family where the woman was seen only as a housewife. And so she had to fight against all this prejudice and against all of these stereotypes. And during the Second World War, she mounted a lab in her bedroom at her home, and she made fundamental discoveries in the neurobiology, neurodevelopmental field. This is just one example how women, with their passion, their intuition, and their drive, can lead to outstanding scientific achievements. But it's not the only example. We can name a lot of women in different fields of science. And they were really an inspiration early in my life that made me want to be a scientist. And so my path as a scientist not only occurred in Portugal, but also in other countries. And I think that this gives you the opportunity to meet different people, to get to know different cultures. And this diversity, which is a term that I really like, it's not only important in science, but in society, and also for you as a human being, because you can learn a lot from these experiences with people with different views and different cultural beliefs when compared to you. And so I think I was born a scientist, because I remember since I was very, very young to be very curious, to want to perform experiments, to try some things. And so I really believe that I was born already a scientist. And then my increase in science my increase in science in the 90s when I was in high school. I really liked biology and chemistry. So I was absolutely sure that I wanted to be a scientist. And then I entered in applied biology, which was a course dedicated to train scientists. And I did my PhD at University of Minho in Health Sciences later on. I also did a postdoctoral fellowship. And then in 2013, I got my first position, let's say independent position. And in 2014, my best project started, which is, as you can see, 2X chromosomes. It is my only daughter that is now 6 years old, almost 7. And this is still my most demanding and challenging project. And later on, I was awarded with our FCT contract as a researcher. And last year, I was awarded with this ERC consolidator. But although I'm telling it to you always, I was awarded, I did this is of course a teamwork. And without the expertise of the people that train me, my mentors and my team, I could not reach what I have reached so far. And so I had the opportunity to work with brilliant people, brilliant researchers, and very, very elegantly driven person from the personal point of view. And so I started my training in Holland, and then I moved to do my PhD with Patricia. And also I spent some time abroad with excellent mentors that collaborated with us. And then I also did my postdoc, finished some things with Patricia, and then started a postdoc with Nuno and I still work with Nuno nowadays. We still collaborate a lot. So these different views from people from different countries with different technical expertise made me the scientist I am today, and also the person I am today. So I have to thank them very, very much. And so what do we study in the lab? We study reward and aversion. We want to understand how our brain perceives pleasure and aversion. And we also do some work on prenatal stress, on the impact of prenatal stress in the circuits that encode reward and aversion. And this is important not only for fundamental neuroscience, but because we also know that disorders such as addiction and depression present deficits in the reward and aversion neurocircuits. And so it is important to understand how our brain perceives something that is positive and something that is appetitive. And in order to understand better the mechanisms underlying these disorders. And we mostly use rodent models, although we also do some studies in humans. And basically imagine that since you wake up, you are flooded with stimuli, right? And you have to really, our brain has to focus, filter and focus on emotionally relevant stimuli. That can be either positive, such as a slice of cheese for the mouse, or a negative one, such as, for example, the fire. And we name these positive versus negative encoding as valence. And one of the key regions important for valence assignment, we believe it is the nucleus accumbens. And so in the nucleus accumbens, our neurons encode some kind of stimuli with a positive stamp, whereas other stimuli will have a negative stamp and other neutral stimulus will not have this stamp. And then this will influence our decision if we want to approach or avoid. And so the circuit is very complex, and I'm not going too much into detail with you on this, but it's just to tell you that we are really interested in one of the core regions of this reward and aversion circuit, which is this region here, which is the nucleus accumbens. And the interesting thing about this region, it is that has been proposed that one population in this region, these D1 neurons, was important for reward, whereas the other neuronal population was mostly important for aversion. However, and I'm not going to take you into detail, but our team, using an animal model in which we give the animals the chance to press a lever to get a food pellet. So the thing is that we found out that by using a technique that is widely used now in neuroscience, that is able to allow us to selectively activate one or another neuronal population. So you can select either to activate D1 or D2 neurons, then you can evaluate the impact that this has on behavior. And what our team found out was that if you activate D1 or D2 neurons, you increase the motivation of the animal. And this was not in agreement with the proposed model in the field. So this was really a very puzzling result that we got. And then we did other type of tests. And here I'm showing to you, when we activate these D1 neurons, we increase reward in the animals. But if we do a different type of stimulation of that exact same neurons, for example, if we do a prolonged stimulation of those neurons, we get aversion. So this means that the same neuronal population can drive reward or aversion depending on the pattern of activity of these neurons. And so then we also registered neuronal activity in other regions of the brain, and we found out that we got completely different neuronal responses depending on the activity of these D1 and D2 neurons in the accumbens. And so this leads us to revisit the model in the field that proposed that D1 neurons were important for reward and D2 neurons were important for aversion. And that's exactly what we will focus our ERC, which is the study of how these reward and aversion is encoded in this region and how is this translated into behavior. And so this is the main focus of our lab now, and it will be in the next years. And we also do this mostly in rodents, but we also have some studies regarding the study of the neuronal circuits of reward and aversion in humans. And one question that I often get this question often because I work in the neuroscience field is if there is a female and a male brain. And as a biologist, I have to tell you that indeed there are some differences in the female and male brain, but it doesn't necessarily mean that this is translated into that this can be translated into, oh, this brain is from a male and this brain is from a female. There are other characteristics that are gender independent that makes each person's brain different from the others. And I do believe that diversity, regardless of the gender, I'm not only talking about gender, is the way to not only in science, but in society. And it's the only way I believe that science and society can grow exponentially. And so these are the people that contributed with most of the work. And as you can see, the ratio of women to men is very high. So, and this is in agreement with what Professor Helena just showed to us, that in Portugal we have a very high ratio of women in the research labs. And so let's see what the future brings. If you can, we can make this ratio a little bit more equal. And the funding agencies that supported our work, also a very a special thanks to these funding agencies. And I'm very thank you to you, and I will be glad to take questions afterwards. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Anna. It was very, very interesting. I think from these talks, we understand why they were awarded, why this research were awarded. For me, it was very interesting. And I was also wondering if your mice, if there was gender equality in your experiment.
It's mea culpa, I have to say. We mostly use males in the initial experiments, but a few years ago, we started to use both males and females. But in terms of reward and aversion, there are not some striking differences regarding the encoding of these events between males and females, because I think it's a very innate type of behaviors.
That's very good to know. So thank you for our speakers. We move fast now to the panel discussion, and we are very lucky that we have some extra panelists that will join us for the discussion. I will start introducing one by one of them and have a short question for each one of them just to warm up, and then we will move to the questions from the audience. So first of all, I would like to introduce my colleague, Sandra Caldeira, who is a deputy head of unit at the Health in Society unit, working at the JRC with us in Science for Policy, or better, for Public Health Policy. She has a PhD in biomedical science, worked in virology, oncology, genetics, taught at the University of Medicine in Lisbon, and worked also as a science editor at the EMBO and has joined the GRC 10 years ago. So Sandra, data shows that we are still far from balanced world in terms of gender in science. We have seen the data already. And how is the situation in your area of work in Science for Policy, to be more concrete? Could you please explain what is Science for Policy to the ones that don't really know what it is, and what is your experience as a woman?
So thank you, Sophia, and hello to everyone again. So Science for Policy, it's like the name says, science that is relevant for policy. As I see it, the difference is at some point in the video of the girls, I think it was Isabel that said, science answers all the questions, all the unknown questions. And I think in Science for Policy, these all unknown questions are framed and are maybe a little bit more limited. So we answer questions that are framed by policy needs or by regulatory needs. And this does not mean that it's very boring, because every time that I speak about regulation and legislation, people run away. But you know, it's actually in all areas of policy, and it's in all aspects of the policy cycle. So it can be, for example, anticipation. You can be imagining the future and thinking about possible problems in the future and thinking how you can prevent these, or thinking on how will we cope with these problems when they arrive, and prepare in advance. And for example, Maria João spoke about this, being prepared, you know, being conscious about how we live now and being prepared for the next pandemic. It can be about policy options. And again, thinking about the COVID pandemic, it's very clear with COVID what this means, thinking about policy options. Do we go on a lockdown? Do we not go on a lockdown? What are the consequences of one on the other? How do we prioritize the vaccinations, etc. It can also be, for example, about enforcement. So if we go forward with a proposal or with a legislation that says you need to limit the use of a particular substance in food or anything else, then you also need to say, how are you going to measure these? How will the private sector, but also the public sector, measure in the same manner to ensure that you don't go a particular threshold? So, you know, it's very varied. I don't find it boring at all. It feeds a lot from fundamental research. So I gave the example of Maria João with the preparedness, but also Raquel mentioned infertility age, and also this should make you think, do we need some policies that promote a younger age and more flexibility for women and for men? For these, also rare diseases, for example, cancer, these are all areas that are where I'm working now, and I really see the parallels with fundamental research now. And the same for Anna, you know, when she shows that you need a diversity of the two brains and so on. This is all things that you can feed into Science for Policy. So it's a big world. I think if I compare to my previous academic life or to my colleagues, I see more variety in these. The projects are much shorter, which I think is good and adds to this variety. There's a lot of pressure as well, maybe a different kind of pressure. So at least in my position, because I have a secure job, I don't have this perish or publish or perish and looking for funding and trying to keep up with your career and taking care of the people in your lab and these kind of things. But I take pressure, or I feel pressure from the big responsibility that that it is that, you know, like your results and your science, your thoughts, your ideas, etc., they will shape policies that actually affect 450 million people in the European Union. And this pressure is made bigger by a lot of the uncertainty that we have around Science for Policy. So also the fact that things need to happen at a certain time, and often there is serious time pressure, doesn't really allow us to collect all the data as you do, for example, in the lab, until you are sure of the results. So this means that you not only need to live with this uncertainty, but you also have to be very good at communicating it. So as some colleagues of the JRC actually coined, it's a world of post-normal science. This means that it's a science where facts are uncertain, values often are in dispute, and stakes are very high and decisions are very urgent. So you need to, bring all this in. And why am I saying all this thing? I think it's because I really want to highlight that it's so complex that it's clear that you need to have a very diverse environment to do this science for policy. And if I can do it very, very quickly, I want to share my screen again, not for the Slido now, but just to show you what some colleagues of ours here at the JRC, identified as the skills that you need to do science for policy. And I think this is very relevant because it really shows that you need diversity. As Maria João said, the more the merrier. So we're here very binary about men and women, but I think we need to bring in many more types of diversity. So we're speaking about culture, we're speaking about religion, etc. So I don't know if men are from science and women are from Mars, but I think when I look at this, it's pretty obvious to me that we need a whole solar system here if we want to do this right. Thinking about science for policy and the representativeness of women or gender balance, I looked for data, Sophia, because you asked me for it. It wasn't very easy to find. So first I looked inside our house, and that was easy to find. I knew where to go. We have data from 2019. This is public data, and actually inside the Joint Research Center, 40% of the active staff at the moment are female. So it's not 50, but it's not so bad. If you go a little bit higher and you look at middle management, it's the scissors effect that Professor Helena Pereira also referred to. We're at 28%, something like this. So yeah, there's funnel. I need to say that it has been increasing over the years, and this is a consistent increase. And I also feel that there's some support from the institution for women to grow. So hopefully this is going to be a little bit better in the future. I then tried to look outside of our world for more data in this area of science for policy. I didn't find it because it was not very, easy to define exactly what science for policy is, but I found what I think is a good proxy. So it's data from IGA, that's the European Institute for Gender Equality. They're an agency from the Commission. They do beautiful work. I don't know if the people that are listening to us are familiar with them, but they have really amazing work in this area, and also work in the area of science. And from them, I got these slides that I want to share with you, or these values. So the proxy is members and presidents of national academies of science. So in every country, there's one, sometimes two academies of science. So what are the members and what is the gender balance there? And this is what you see in this graph. And guess which color is men and which color is women. So men are green and women are yellow. And this is members. Okay, but if you look at presidents, this is the picture. So I don't think we need to go much further in this. I mean, the data speaks for themselves. There's definitely room for improvement in this area as well. And maybe I stop here, Sophia, because I realize we're a bit late, and I want to give room for everyone else to speak.
Thank you, Sandra. Yes, we are quite late, but I think we are quite entertained by everything that we are listening, and I think it's very, very relevant. I will move now to our next panelist, who is Monica Diaz. Thank you so much, Monica, for being here. It's a pleasure. Monica is a director of Instituto Gulbenkian da Ciência, Biological and Biomedical Research Institute. She's also a biochemist, biochemist and a cellular biologist, and also the head of the Cell Cycle Regulation Research Group. She has been awarded several awards, like the Pfizer Award for Basic Research, the Keith Porter Prize, and the American Society for Cell Biology, and the Eppendorf Young Europe Investigator Award. And she's an EMBO member. So what I would like to, sorry, to ask you, what do you think it's the importance of having role models, leader role models, as Sandra has shown, this very difficult representative of women leading, and what is your experiences as head of Institute Gulbenkian de Ciencia?
Hello, everyone. I'd like to congratulate you for this initiative. It's a very important one, and it's important to show the faces of Portuguese science. And I long for a moment that we don't have to celebrate these days, because you know, it doesn't make sense anymore, and we have as many women as men. So I think that when talking about role models, I think they are extremely important. That's one of the reasons that I think sometimes we really need quotas in certain areas of society. And for example, I think about my case when, you know, I was a scientist, and I had to, you know, thinking about becoming a group leader, having role models that were female group leaders was very important for me. And then when it became the time that maybe I would become the head of the IGC, it was extremely important to have other examples of females that were directors of research institutes, that were good scientists, and that were also mothers. So I think, you know, having role models is an extremely important thing, and therefore, you know, like, for example, having the president of the European Commission being a woman, this is also very important, that we can see that this is possible for everyone. So I think, you know, when thinking about diversity, we have to think that all the different levels should be populated by people, women, men, and people from different places. And this is one of the reasons why at the IGC, one of our mottos is science from all for all, because diversity is very important for us. So I would say that we have to care about role models, but I would also like to say that I think there are different aspects that all of us, and in particular people that are in leading positions, should think about when we think about diversity in science and the role of women. And I think we should really be, as Professor Helena Pereira said, very proactive regarding this. So one of the things is that we have to really think about the environment that we create in our institutions to promote work-life balance. Supporting people and having good mentors, I think it's very important. Mentors were very important for me also. When I had to decide and make a decision, my mentors helped me a lot. And I think we heard also about mentors from the previous people that spoke. When we organize meetings and evaluation panels, and we also heard about them, it's really important that we think about diversity. And also when we think about recruitment and evaluation, I think all those aspects, we always have to think about how we do them, and we do them in the best way. And before I finish, I would just like to highlight two places where I think we can get information that can help people when they have to organize these things. One of them is the EU Life has actually had a European project called Libra that has done a very good work at, you know, writing guidelines in terms of like how to recruit and how to evaluate scientists in terms of promoting gender balance. And it's really good. So I recommend that people look at the site of Libra. And the other one is the EMBO Young Investigator Program. They are really great. So I was fortunate that I had an EMBO installation grant, which is actually funded by the FCT. And this is a very important program. And through the EMBO program, through that program, I had access to a mentor. And we have things like when you go to meetings, you have grants to support childcare and other things. And they have a variety of actions that actually promote these gender balance that are super, super important. So I do recommend that people look into what is done in those institutions. And I leave you there. And I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Thank you, Monica. I think there is food for thought for our discussion later, but I wanted to introduce our other panelists. I would like also to introduce my colleague Sandra Cook, who is a senior scientist at the European Commission Joint Research Center. She graduated in science and technology engineering and mathematics-based education, and she completed with a PhD at the Faculty of Medicine and Pharmacy, and she's been acting as an ambassador for STEM girls, giving several testimonials. And when knowing you, Sandra, and knowing the projects that you're involved, I would like to ask you if you think there is a feminine approach to your science work that it's different from the male one. We have talked about how important it is to be balanced, so I would like to hear from you.
So maybe I can start to say what I think is important. You know, being a scientist is, first of all, we heard it a few times already, diversity, embracing diversity, also authenticity. And we have heard a few keywords, and I would start with the 5 C's maybe. I'm working in the field of 3 R's, but starting in the 5 C's, and some have been said. So we need to be creative, we need to be curious, we need to have a mind of critical thinking, we need to collaborate, we need to communicate. So these are really all important scientific aspects and assets that we would need, and they are not really gender related. So being curious and posing questions, engage in authentic and also learn from each other, work together, think critical, creatively, collaborate and communicate with others to develop their understanding and ideas. This is not really gender related. Now, one of the things that has been said many occasions about the fact what is different in science between males and female ones is that it has been said that often women tend to more easily show emotions. However, I think we have to be very careful, because also historically this has been often used to undermine women's authority. So when we strictly speak scientifically, and also you asked me, Sophia, to get some data. So basically, when you look at research on that, there are very, very small gender differences in emotion expression when you look at the scientific literature for adults, with women having a greater emotional expressivity, especially for positive emotion. But what is interesting and intriguing is they tend to internalize negative emotions, such as sadness, but the differences are very small. So I would say, for me personally, I think we have another C. So, you know, science is about confrontation, about ideas and dialogue. We also need to make decisions. I mean, I've been working a lot of my career in the lab, so it is every experiment comes to a point that you need to make some decisions, but also, especially at the European Commission Joint Research Center, where we are working, it's also harmonizing, an harmonizing business. And we are really, really trained, I think, also in my career, also with my mentors, as I heard, to listen to different point of views, gather ideas, ways of doing, collect them, and come to a kind of conclusion. Yeah. So also, as it was said in the previous presentations, it is a teamwork. You know, we talked about Nobel Prize winners, and I'm the greatest fan of Rita Levi-Montalcini, my great idol. But I think now science is very multidisciplinary. You talked about being a STEM ambassador. It's about multidisciplinarity, and that is something that I embrace, and which is, again, not really gender related. I think kindness is also an asset we just have to ask, because science is confrontational, but we need to have a kind and gentle attitude, and overall being positive. You know, we heard a bit about the presentation, you know, how we have to do that. Now, for this intervention, I also gathered some lab data, some data from other women scientists, and they tended to speak on the question that female approach often might be characterized by broader view of thinking. Is that multitasking, because we already have to do many things? But I see also, obviously, we have obviously also male colleagues that are great in that. So I would also have a tendency to be a bit careful in making these things very, very hard with data. But younger colleagues of mine, because I'm interviewing also, let's say, scientific women also early in career, they tended to say that women are often doing more organizational tasks, but also in the professional environment, organizational agendas, taking minutes and things like that. And there was a tendency from some of these answers to see that really as something which is still somewhere in some environments living, which was not very appreciated. So I think I try to give a little bit a view that we have to be very careful to make this type of conclusions. And I think it is very much driven by all of us, how we can be, let's say, positive scientists and embracing all these aspects like authenticity, diversity, and all the C's that are related to science. So.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Sandra. So I will now introduce our last but not the least panelist, who is Raquel Gaspar, who is a biologist and who since a very early age has dreamed to dedicate her life to study and conservation of the ocean. And during her PhD, she found that decline in the saddle bottlenose dolphin population could only be avoided by eliminating the human threats to their habitat, the seagrass meadows. So in 2015, Raquel co-founded the Ocean Alive, that we will hear more about a bit later, not much later because we are running out of time, and creating the project Guardians of the Sea, which trains women from the Sado estuary fishing community as marine guides and awareness agents. So what I wanted to ask Raquel, it's the value of the woman, their wisdom, their knowledge in the position of the society and the community.
Hello, good morning or good afternoon. Thank you very much for this invitation. You see, I strongly believe that we women are a symbol of sustainability. I think we are what we do. And when it matters to ocean conservation, fishing women have not only a knowledge, not only ecological relation with the sea, but these tools are very important. We call it wisdom. And wisdom is one of the basic steps for knowledge. And what we do in Ocean Alive is to value their wisdom into science and especially into ocean conservation. Their position in the community, once they have a different status as new members of a project, like as keepers of the sea, it also increases and makes women also being inspirational. We women are mothers, not only of them, of course, but I would say like this because the women I work have this experience. And as a mother also, I speak, I believe that our role in the society brings us up to a position that we cannot neglect. We have to do the steps towards educating the next generations into what we believe the human beings should be. So I believe like this because I will speak after.
Thank you so much, Raquel. I would add that I would highlight that this education should not only be of young girls to have role models, but also of young boys to know what is the normality that it's both women and men.
Yeah, I think we do have a role in women and men education. Yes, I think we are key.
So I will move now for the questions from the audience, and I will let you step in, any of you who want to reply. So the first question is, how do we encourage young girls to do science and finally get rid of the still very vivid idea that girls are bad at maths. So who wants to reply to this question?
I can give it a go if you want. So
Yes, please.
I've participated in this very interesting event organized by the State Department in the US that was about exactly that, discussing how we can attract more women to science. And something that was fascinating was how having role models everywhere enable girls to actually start thinking that they are good and that they can perform whatever work a man can in engineering or in mathematics, but that are generally more driven towards men and even supported by parents at home as being something that their son could do, but not their daughter. And so there's several different layers of complexity. I favor these of having role models quite a lot. I think they are very important, but also how we can talk to educators in schools and even to parents to say that women can achieve exactly the same, and the bias that are even inconspicuous bias that we are not aware of, that we have to work in order to value what girls can do.
Thank you, Maria João. I would also like to add that it's very important. I think it's very relevant to have open days like the ones that IGC also does and other institutions does, but that everyone comes and see who are the faces of the researchers and the scientists. I see that also Sandra Kirk, she wants to answer this question.
Yeah, I would be completely in line with Maria João. We talked a little bit about role models and mentoring also. So also when I'm, let's say, trying to reach STEM girls to really, because I mean, I started, let's say, with this career, I think others also quite early, many years ago. And we had the opportunity, you know, in that time already to do these studies, but you see still a lot of problems. And I think being outspoken about it, acting a bit as mentors and transferring now everything what we have learned, and going out and saying what we're doing and what is the benefit of doing this type of education, also multidisciplinary, I would say. I would not only say mathematics, but embracing, let's say, a multidisciplinary education, which is a STEM education. And you can say the same for human sciences, because often we speak about STEM education, you know, in one direction, but the same thing for other scientific disciplines. So I'm embracing a lot mentoring and being outspoken, and as it was said before, also having role models. I'm also very happy now to see some leaderships, you know, that we can do that. And also in the beginning of my career, my first professor, basic research, is still my role model, but I got also obviously other role models and let's say all gender, and I think that is very good. But in this case, I would stimulate that also. Yeah.
Thanks, Sandra. I think Sandra Caldeira also wants to reply to this.
Yes, I just want to add something else. So I totally agree with role models and mentoring and all these things. And I think there's something else that we can do, everyone can do, to elevate female voices and to actually work on this unconscious bias and so on. You know, for example, if we are at a meeting or something and someone says something that you agree with, and if this person happens to be a lady, it's really supportive if after she speaks, you speak as well and you say her name. And I totally agree with what Maria said and what Sandra said. And this you can do also if you're not at the meeting and you're just watching television, and you can say, I totally agree with what Grassa said or whatever said. And you can also do if you are a person that, you know, already has a position that actually allows you to be a role model, but you give visibility to others so that, you know, in television or in your institution, it's not always the same female face that shows, that you show that there's more than just, I don't know, in our case, for example, Monica or Elena. So I think in every different role, we can do something to elevate the female voice and to show that there's much more out there than what is being considered at the moment.
Thank you. Very relevant, Sandra. So I will move to the next question for the sake of time. And I think this question, it's related with the data that Professor Elena was showing about women, and maybe also the data that you, Sandra, showed about women in leadership positions, and ask if this is due to the decrease in women actually applying for these positions, lack of confidence, maternity reasons, or because they are not being selected for higher positions because there is a gender bias. I don't know who wants to reply to this. Yes, Anna João, please.
Hi. As a scientist, of course, I did some studying on the subject, and I found out that there are some very interesting papers, very recent papers, that suggest that it's a combination of society stereotypes, but also the perception that women have of themselves. So it's not only male fault, it's also females' characteristics that makes females less confident in applying, for example, for a directive position as a head of a department or an institute. And I'm mostly talking about science, but these studies exist in also related to companies, for example, to be a CEO. So this is not only a male perception, but also a female perception that we need to work. And being a mother, I think that one of the things we have to do is to educate boys and girls that gender does not define a person in terms of competences, and that some fragilities that are associated with the females, let's say, I don't think they are fragilities at all. And they can even be our strength, like what Sandra was saying a little bit before about our emotional aspects. You can use that on your behalf. You can use that passion, that emotion to drive your work. So I think we have to change the way we look at these problems. And to sum up, I think it's a combination of both. And I think that we can do active things now, but we can only change society if we educate the younger generations to look at diversity as a plus and as the way to evolve as a society.
Yes, thank you. And actually, me and my colleagues on preparing this event, we also did some research, and there was also some data that was showing, for instance, that for ERC grants, actually, women tend to sell themselves less. They are very much more modest. I also saw some testimonies of people giving grants that they had changed some the terminology they use for the request of the grants, and they instead of putting, you should put something innovative that you did or something outstanding, to say put something different or something new you have done, and then the applications from women increase. So these type of things. And also there were grants that they were attributing to give grants for people that had a caregiver at home. They could have these grants for science, extra grant for science, and it increased, and 80% were women. So I think there are actually a lot of factors from our side, and not only gender bias, if there is one. So Sandra Kuk, you also wanted to add something to this?
Maybe, let's say, in terms of leadership, what do we mean by that? Because you can be leader in many roles. So, a leader normally has to have a vision, works with people, embraces training, and let's say does also other things. So one of the things that I think also, that we are in a society with still, in many cases, very traditional structures. And I'm also a mother of 3 girls. And often, let's say, specific leadership roles might be, not always be combinable with specific stages in your career. But if we think out of the box, because, you know, we are women in scientists, we can be creative. So we can have other ways also of doing leadership, and you can do that within your science, but you can do that also in other situations. So I must say the term leadership obviously is linked to let's say growing in a career in let's say often a very conventional, traditional way of hierarchical structures in organization. But now and more we start to see organizations growing to people ecosystems, and a lot of the qualities, you know, we have been discussing, they can be used there. So I would also think a little bit there, you know, with all our experience in growing kids, working, etc., we have some assets that can be also be used in these new roles and types of leadership. So something just to reflect on together.
Thank you. For the sake of time, I see there are two specific questions to Maria João and to Raquel, who is related with your scientific work, that maybe you could reply to them because we are already going over time. And I will finish with the last question or comment that say that yes, we need to be supportive partners, and symmetric World Day of Men and Boys in Care should be done. So what do you think of these? If anyone wants to comment. No one wants to comment?
So can you specify the question again, Sophia?
So it was more of a comment, and she wants to mention that there should be maybe more rewards for men that have a supportive role at home, a caring role at home, when normally it's taken by women. It was mentioned before that one of the success keys of our speakers was because they had supportive partners. So maybe we should also, you know, I think I agree a bit that it's kind of outstanding that men say that they have a supportive role at home. It's still a bit of a taboo role.
Yeah, no, and
I see that Raquel, she puts her hand. Yes, please.
No, I just want, I think that we probably all want to say sort of the same thing. I think even yesterday I was seeing some news that they were saying that, you know, like a supportive father is like an outstanding father, whereas, you know, women taking care of their kids is sort of what they are supposed to do. And this, of course, has to change in the society, right? For any female that wants to take leadership roles in, it's not just in science, right? In any field. And this really has to start, I mean, as agreeing with what several people said before, this has to start at very early age, because this, I don't know how you teach this at school or something, but it is important that the you know, it's also in our choice, but of course, you know, like a partner is someone, you know, we don't necessarily rationally choose who we fall in love with, right? So it's a bit of a difficult thing what we are saying here, you know, choose the right partner. I think that, you know, that's the easiest way. The most difficult things is, you know, how to work with when you encounter these problems and your partner is not so supportive as you wished for, and how can you balance things out? And here, I mean, there's no right recipe, but I think that even, you know, men should discuss among themselves, right? Like parallel to what we are doing here, maybe men should exchange tips and really get onto, you know, a day celebrating the supportive father would be a way to help the society to change this and not see the supporting father as the, you know, outstanding and special person.
Right.
But can I say very quickly? But I also think this is, you know, it's the whole society, even schools. Men are highly discriminated in schools. When, you know, my husband, you know, they always think that I'm the one that takes care of our daughter and not my husband, who does much more than me. And it's very discriminating. So I think at whole levels, we have to, you know, the whole society needs to think about this and, you know, look at equality, and not just thinking that women are the ones that have to do it. So, and I think we can reinforce that also when we speak with schools and when we speak with other sectors of society.
Yes, schools and doctors, and often the doctors want to talk with the mom and this type of things. I completely agree.
If you allow me, as a biologist, yes. I always say when people ask what is the role of the father, oh, he helps you. I always say, well, she has 50% of his genes, so we better help because he has the same responsibility. So half of our chromosomes are from our father. So he has a biological role to fulfill. So it's not that they have to be supportive, they just have to do their job as parents. So I think we should sell this biological perspective, yes. Like half of the genes are from your father. So this has to be really emphasized. So it's not, of course, that we have to say that there are things that the mothers have to do, like the breastfeeding period and etc., which are things that are more related to the mother, I have to say. And this is okay, this is biology. But in the long term, parents have to equally divide their their work at home. So I think we should not give merit to parents that do that because it's their job, right? But of course, I understand that this positive discrimination can have an impact in the male society. But still, I don't think it's the way we should approach this problem.
Yes, thank you. So Sandra, just to finalize, because I think we need to close.
Okay, I just wanted to link on the school thing and how society, every part of the society should help in this endeavor. Because I remember when I was at school, there was said, who's becoming the class mother? So, I mean, I think there it starts. So I think we have to say, and we had a lot of excellent class representatives, which were fathers. So I think it's also, like we said, we have to help each other. Everybody has to make that change, and we have to be a bit proactive, because it is easy to go into the things that always have been done. So I think, I think Sandra was saying it, we need to really make this change together. And the more we are doing that, the more things will be not, let's say, as an outsider, but just normal. So, yeah.
Thank you, Sandra. And thank you all. Thank you so much. I think we could spend the entire afternoon discussing these subjects, and there would still be questions and food for thought, but I think it's a good beginning, and I hope we inspired our audience. So the keywords, it's a role of a society. It should not be a role of women in science or women in general, but also a shared role of women and men and the society, to show how equal we are and how diverse everything should be. It's important to have role models. We heard a lot, and to give positive rewards to the ones that go and to be there. We actually collect a lot of examples that of things that could be done, and maybe I'm talking to my colleagues. We could think about writing a post on our website to put all these information, also the one that we collected there. And thank you so much. It was very much appreciated. And we have a little surprise, or a big surprise for everyone, which is the opening of our exhibition. And I will give the floor to Raquel to explain it.
Okay, so I shall start by sharing the screen. Let me take you to the sea. Let me take you to my world. In Ocean Alive, the organization I created, we do value the wisdom of women of the sea to protect a kind of a marine forest that I guess you do not know this name, called seagrass meadows. We call them the keepers of the sea. And how we do this, it all came back to the way I was grown up as a scientist. I was a marine biologist, I still am, but I studied whales and dolphins. And while studying the dolphins in the Southwest Estuary, I understood that it was only by preserving the habitat that this dolphin population needed that I could help to save the population. I realized that my work as a marine biologist was not enough. I had to do something. As a woman, I shall also say that I had to seek for help because I myself couldn't do a lot. And then when I look around, I understood there were other women in a boat like me, and these were fishing women in the Southwest Estuary. So they, like me, needed to protect this habitat where my arrow is, the seagrass meadows. It's a marine habitat made of plants, marine plants, and they are a nursery for marine life, and they are a key top habitat as a natural carbon sink. So they're very important for our needs of marine resources and to combat climate change. These women know this habitat and knew this habitat more than I did because they have this ecological relationship with this habitat. I, as a marine biologist, learned to dive and to understand about this habitat. But as an organization, we wanted to give voice to this habitat. So what we did was, like it says here, we created new occupational and professional roles tailored to these women's expertise and experience. This wisdom was put on the benefit of educating other people about seagrass meadows, on changing behaviors in their community and inspiring outside of their community the behaviors needed to protect this habitat. And finally, which I will focus at the last, collecting data on the location of this habitat. You do know that we cannot protect if we do not know where it is. So this exhibition gives you an information about the general project, but also about the activities in which the keepers of the sea are engaged in education, raising awareness, and mapping the seagrass meadows. I would like to jump to here. I'd like to show you one of the sea keepers, which is called Cidalia. And if you want to know her, the word I would say to you from her is, I am ready. This is Cidalia. I would like you to hear her.
É uma coisa que faço mesmo com gosto e espero que hoje estou a fazê-lo, mas espero que mais tarde a camada jovem que se interessem por este trabalho, porque é bom que continue. É importante mesmo, é urgente mesmo fazerem com que batalhem, apoiem e fazerem o trabalho que nós estamos a fazer agora.
Again, her phrase for me is always, Raquel, I'm ready. And what she does with us, she is what we call an awareness agent. She helps us cleaning the estuary. You know that plastic pollution is one of the most higher threats of the water that we are, the water of the ocean. And but she has a very important role in collecting data about the location of the seagrass meadows. So for you to understand this kind of work, let's jump to here, to this page called mapping. So what we did was, since these women know exactly where the seagrass meadows are, I talked to them and asked them if they would like to learn how to use a GPS, and with that tool help us creating a map of where the seagrass meadows are. So I will not give you this video now, but if you want to join to one of these conversations, you should listen to this video here, which is actually Elena on the right, the first woman who accepted to go on this adventure, explaining to the others how to use a GPS and how to map the seagrass meadows. And then the video shows you how they do it on the field. So today we have this map, which I will not link, open it because it's very difficult to control. But as a result of 2 years of work, we have most of the seagrass meadows of the Southwest Estuary mapped. And what's this tool for? You know, science sometimes stays on the labs and on papers and doesn't have an utility. I think that I'm privileged to work on a field of, since seagrass meadows are disappearing at 2 football pitches every hour, I'm lucky to work on a field where what we do, as little as science, has an application. And this map today is already an application, for instance, for the local authorities to approve or disapprove oyster culture installations in the places where are very important for seagrass meadows. Of course, all this work was not possible without scientists. We have a very good team from CCMAR, Centro of Ciências do Mar, from connected to University of Algarve. We also trained us, and our role as an organization is to link the community, the scientists, and the political agenda into strategies. For instance, we are struggling for the seagrass meadows and the salt marshes, which is also another kind of marine forest of the estuaries, to be considered in the national strategy for naturally carbon neutrality until 2050. So
thank you.
This is just the scope of our work, from women on the field to the political strategies. And I'm very proud of the women I work with. Thank you.
And I think you should. I think we felt in love for this project since we discovered it, because of the role of women that are not scientists also participating. And here again, we see science for policy and also how to involve the community. Please visit this exhibition in our website. I think someone can put the link in our chat so they can see it. You will also find an even account because we are trying to support this project that was highly affected also by the COVID pandemic. So please, any support, it's welcome. We can all make the difference. And it's right time to close our session, which has been well behind the hour. I will just inform you that we have another event coming up on the 24th of February that will be shared by me and Sergio. So a man and woman, and we will talk about science communication. You just need to check in our website. And thank you so much for being here with us. For the ones that didn't have the opportunity to see it, I will play again our video. And we will close with it. Thank you so much to all. Thank you to our marvelous speakers and to my colleagues and to everyone that was.
And thank you to you, Sophia.
Thanks, Sophia. Thanks to everybody.
Well, all the speakers, I meant also all the panelists, of course, and everyone involved in the organization of this. See you next time.
For me, science is about discovering our world and how nature functions, and then using it to improve people's lives. And I'd very like to be a scientist because it fascinates me, the idea of discovering new things to be able to develop our world and help other people and improve new techniques. I really like it.
I like science because it's interesting and fun to do and see. Science is experimenting, finding out new things and discovering how our planet works.
A scientist to me is a person who revolutionizes the world with their theories, but not only that. Also, a person who discovers explanations for every single unknown thing. Even though being a scientist is a very interesting job, I don't really want to be one when I grow up. Instead, I want to be a diplomat.
Hello.
Hello.
What's your name?
Laura.
Hello, Laura. What would you like to be when you grow up?
An invention. To do some inventions.
And what would you like to invent?
A hat with some wings. And then you can fly, and I would like to do a light with some stars you can see in the dark.
Okay, thank you.
Bye.
Hi, Clara.
Hi.
What is that cool thing you have there?
Microscope.
A microscope. Wow, cool. What do you want to be when you grow up?
Scientist.
Yes? Why?
Because I want to work with cells.
Wow, you already have seen the cells in the microscope?
Yes.
Cool. Thanks, Clara.
Because I love.
Hi, Amelia. Hi, what do you think about science? Is it good? You like it? Tu gostas da ciência, Amélia?